Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee or a delicious menu item while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Come by and say hello to Maui. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
Chenault and Gray Publishing, the parent company of Troller Games, is proud to announce our latest multi-volume project, the Robert E. Howard Art Chronology. Ever since the successful production of our last collection, which spotlighted over 100 years of art represented in the works of Edgar Rice Burroughs, we have dreamed of doing another project of that magnitude, and it's finally happening. Written and compiled by award-winning author Michael Tierney, the same fellow who headed up the Edgar Rice Burroughs project, this 4-volume set contains black and white as well as full-color art that hasn't been seen since its release, and some pieces that have been buried away and never shown until now. This narrative gives the history of Howard's work and the often legendary artists who visualized it, including such giants as Frank Frazetta and Michael Wheeling. Robert Irvin Howard needs no introduction to most folks. He was an American pulp writer of fantasy, horror, historical adventure, boxing, western, and detective fiction. Howard wrote over 300 stories and 700 poems, filled with his love of everything from swashbuckling adventure to dark horror. His westerns garnered him the name Two Gun Bob, and he is well known for the character Conan the Barbarian, and widely regarded as the father of the sword and sorcery subgenre. Officially licensed and sanctioned by Robert E. Howard Properties LLC Incorporated, this nearly 1,200-page examination of the vast publishing illustrative history of Robert E. Howard is divided into 4 parts, and each grouped chronologically, crammed with art and information. If successful enough, this project will offer up some exciting stretch rewards, including an amazing collector's level. We are extremely proud and happy to also announce that Sarah Frazetta, granddaughter of Frank Frazetta, has agreed to draw a pen and ink of Conan and Bellet for this project as well. The Robert E. Howard Art Chronology, now on Kickstarter. Please make your pledge today. By Crom.
Trollord Games, join the fray.
And good evening, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, where we know that what's best in life is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of their women. And if you are a Robert E. Howard fan, tonight is your night. This is an exciting Kickstarter. Yes, it's a Kickstarter, and I don't care. It's a Kickstarter that has just kicked off today, and it's already phenomenally successful. So this is one you're going to want to get in on. Welcome to the show, the man you've seen on our bi-weekly LCS Guys show, Michael Tierney, who is behind this project. Michael, welcome. You've been showing off bits and pieces of this on the LCS Guys show. It must feel good to actually get it out there now.
Nice to offer for real there. You know, I've been teasing the Edgar Rice Burroughs Art Chronology that I did a while back and showing it. And it's nice. Now it's going to have a brother. Robert E. Howard Chronology is going to join the Edgar Rice Burroughs Chronology.
Now, which one's the thicker brick?
The Robert E. Howard's going to make the Edgar Rice Burroughs look a little slim.
Oh,
you've seen that. You know what an audacious statement that is. I mean, there's a lot there.
That Robert E. Howard, no, I'm sorry, the Edgar Rice Burroughs one is one you could like put above your back door, and if a criminal walks in and hits him on the head, it'll squish him. So this one's really going to be huge.
Weapon in 7 states. I mean, just to show for comparison size.
Oh my gosh, yes, that is huge, and this is going to be bigger.
Bigger.
And you've gotten some help on this one from Rusty Burke, who's serving as your editor on this campaign.
Right. Yeah. Rusty's helping out. We had a few different editors on the Egg Ross Burrows, but none of them had the knowledge I had. And of course, the knowledge I had grew from when I started to where when I got done. And it's been the same thing on the Robert E. Howard. Is I know more now than I did a year ago, but not nearly as much as I know a year from now. Well, Rusty, he's got it down already, so he can tell me when I'm getting it wrong.
Well, welcome to the show, Rusty.
At least when I don't remember it, I can look it up.
There you go.
you know when to look when something doesn't trigger you. You say, "Hey, that doesn't look right." Yeah.
And the cool thing is that this is going to be one of those books that later on people are going to go to look something up about Conan, because it's not just an art chronology. I mean, that's just like picture. You're putting a lot of details and facts into this book.
Yeah, it's kind of like an illustrated bibliography. And, and Rusty, I mean, he's got the credits. I mean, it's like you're going to see him mentioned a lot in there because he was the editor on some of these books I'm covering and talking about. And, and what he did such a great job of. When we were reading, Howard back like in the 60s and 70s, we just lamented how it was so editorialized and just butchered up. You could tell when you were reading pure Howard when you were not. And Rusty's been very active in, filtering all that other interference out and giving us a good, clear signal of Howard's original words.
So are you saying that publishers in the 70s were bowdlerizing the Howard works?
I'll let Rusty answer that one.
In some cases, yes, they were. There were, Howard had a lamentable tendency to racial stereotyping, and a lot of that got removed. And then in the Conan stuff, especially, Sprague de Camp, starting back in the 50s, actually had decided that the Conan stories should be published in a kind of chronological order based on Conan's career, as opposed to the order in which they'd been written or published. Patrice Louinet and I both, in editing the Wandering Star books, agreed that Howard had said that he wrote the stories in no particular order, as if this adventurer had been telling you, where you're sitting around a campfire and he's telling you the stories of his life kind of at random. And when you read them that way, when you read them in the order that he wrote them, you get a much richer sense of the character, I think, than if it's, Man of Destiny. That was actually the title that Sprague used on one of his books or one of his stories.
Well, I'm surprised that they would edit them for that kind of for sensitivity reading in the 70s, which seemed to be more freewheeling on that aspect. I would expect, books today to say, okay, we need to Disneyfy this thing down a little bit.
The 70s was a real, the civil rights movement was really gaining a lot of traction back then. And, there are arguments on both sides. I can see the arguments for trying to limit the rather insensitive stereotyping. The fact is, Howard stereotyped everybody. I'm Irish. He stereotyped the Irish too. It's what pulp writers did.
It was equal opportunity.
Well, it was a kind of shorthand. I don't have to describe this person to you. All I got to do is tell you he's Irish, and you immediately know he's a drunk and he picks fights.
Yeah, but he's a cop probably.
All I got to do is tell you he's
an
Italian, and you know that he's probably going to lie to you, and he's kind of a cheat. And these were stereotypes that they used. It's lamentable, but
language.
It's the way it appeared.
That was probably one of the things I didn't like.
Was the language?
Yeah, the stereotypical language. Some of the words we don't use today.
Oh, okay. I got you. Well, we have an active chat for this crowdfunded promotion here. We have Eric Kent in the chat. What's up, RJ? You're up, guys. You're the audience. So I always say we don't have a show unless you guys are here. Robert Roberts is here. Hail Xenu. Feels like Robert E. Howard really speaks to him. Herwenberg is, of course, our master wrench, who's always putting out the links. So if you have not seen the link below, watch for it in the chat. Herwenberg will have links aplenty, and he's Google. He's living Google. So if there's a question that comes up, he'll have the answer within 30 seconds in the chat. Bianca Zombie, welcome. We appreciate you being here. And while we've been talking, 2 more backers have joined up on this. So we have a tradition here on the show. Any campaign that gets backers while we are talking about the campaign, we claim the credit for doing that. We call that that's our shake and bake moment.
It's shake and bake, and I help.
Oh,
So-
Lordy, I remember that commercial.
So somebody in our chat, we're going to assume, went out here and backed this project. 2 somebodies possibly. $44,000 in less than 24 hours. You've still got your 31 days to go. You were only asking for 15,000. So this is a done deal, folks. This is going to happen.
Yeah, it's a great project. It's wonderful the support we're getting, the excitement we're getting from all the fans. I mean, the visual history to go with it, and the history itself. I mean, it's a great 1-2 punch. I mean, it's going to be a knockout.
Now,
It's
you were
gonna
talking about
happen-
possibly.
It's going to happen as long as Michael doesn't need any sleep for the next year.
Oh well, yeah, that's fine.
True, yeah.
He did. Now, so for the next year, we're talking about the end of this year. I mean, what's your delivery date goal on this?
Well, they put on there February. I contacted about her like, oh, we forgot to contact you. And it's probably hopefully sometime next year. It's not going to be in February. I'll be lucky to get my part done by February. I know Rusty needs some time to do his part, and then they need time to produce it. The good thing is I think we're not going to have to go through multiple layers of editorialization. I think Rusty's going to, he needs his time, but at the same time, I think he's going to save us a lot of time by getting it right, first time through, and then we go into the printing process. And there's another thing where we'll save some time from having done the Egg Rise Burroughs chronology. They ran into a lot of delays with the slipcases. They know what to expect now, and same time when even it comes time to ship them, the Egg Rise Burroughs chronology, they ran into problems with a lot of damages on the shipment. The slipcases were getting damaged. They realized they had to do a box within a box because it's just so big and heavy. They've had all those lessons now. They know what they're doing this time. So I think that will streamline the production process and get it going. So, we want to get it out sometime next year, and that's the target. I won't say when next year, sometime next year.
Now, you were talking about putting some stretch goals on here. I haven't scrolled down far enough yet to see if you put them on yet, or if you even had time. I mean, you hit 44,000 just right out the gate almost here.
They've got a few listed to go down to the bottom.
Let's do that. Let's see what the stretch goals are and see what has been hit already. Okay, we're coming up on that first stretch goal here, and it's just you're coming on it like a steam engine down a mountain.
Yeah, we're going to find that. What we've been talking about doing was like 3 books, collecting the Conan stories, the original text from the Weird Tales, and so that would be like 3 books. And then they're also talking about doing some prints. There's some prints. I did a lot of different versions of these covers for the chronology. I don't think that's any of the prints they're talking about there. We may get to those when we get into the next $100,000.
Okay, so the 50K mark that you're coming up on here, that's going to be the Peter Bradley prints of Solomon Kane.
Okay. Yeah, I
And
haven't
then
seen
at
them, so I don't know what they look like.
Okay, well, we'll just go down right here now. When you hit 60,000, and you will, that's when you hit Sarah Frazetta's print. 75K is the anthology of the collected Conan stories as they appeared in Weird Tales. And at 100,000, by the way, there's a second collection. So I'm guessing you're kind of splitting them into 2 halves.
Yeah, I've already told them what 3 books you really got to go in the order that they were published. Was my suggestion. I don't know if that's what they're going to follow me on, but that was my suggestion. Told them what the best way to split them up with.
All right, and at 80,000, you've got a collector's print from the Pulps. So have you?
That's probably one of those covers I worked up. I'm not sure which one because I worked up several.
Okay, so one of those original covers that have been cleaned up and turned into a sort of a mini poster-sized print. Yeah. Oh, all the type removed. It's a virgin cover, as they like to call it.
I'm not sure. Now down there, you got another video where it shows a real brief, like 30-second or so tour of the Egg Rise Burroughs chronology. I mean, it's real brief.
Okay, I didn't share sound, but let's see if we can play it. We don't need sound to see the art. For full screen. This is guys.
It's a collection of 4 large books filled with and narrative information about Burroughs' works, complete with beautiful color photos. Not sparing any detail, Tierney goes over Burroughs' lesser-known works, but also his most famous series, Tarzan, exploring its progression through culture. Tracing Burroughs' inspirations, business, and works themselves, Tierney creates a fully rounded examination of Edgar Rice Burroughs' works.
Okay, that was a short one.
Yeah, but it kind of gives you an idea of what's inside. You have big pictures.
Yeah. So what you saw there.
All mixed with text.
So what you saw there, sort of like a coffee table book, but too big for the coffee table.
Just about, yeah. Might weigh it down, might bow it in the middle.
You can put some legs on it, and it will be the coffee table.
There you go.
So where does the Robert E. Howard art chronology start? I mean, everybody thinks Robert E. Howard. They're like, oh yeah, Solomon Kane, yeah, Conan the Barbarian. But
I start right.
If I look at the first picture, what would I see at the very beginning?
Well, you're going to see like the Weird Tales. So that was his early successes. But I start right at the beginning, even before that, because like one of the things I knew as a collector, I'd be seeing things like Yellow Jacket. What was the Yellow Jacket that he had some stories published in and things like that? Until you do any research on it, you'll see all these things listed out there about stories here and there, and you're like, well, what is that? What's the Junto? And what it was, he was publishing a lot of school newspapers, a lot of little small fan press, and so I give you his entire amateur career, the first opening introduction, and then they're working to him going professional. So I mean, I'm going to tell you everything. All the stories he did, they got published. I mean, Robert E. Howard was a very prolific writer. I mean, it's incredible the amount of work he did in about 10, 15 years. I mean, back then you didn't have the distractions we have today, and he was writing all the time. And I think just about everything's seen print. I mean, the only thing we haven't seen is the greatest shopping list of Robert E. Howard. Other than that, I mean, it's in print.
Oh,
I mean,
we've published that. You probably just didn't know it.
Oh, okay, I missed
there you go.
I haven't got that one yet.
There's actually one. The foundation, the Robert E. Howard Foundation, actually published his school papers, like for algebra or for arithmetic and for English, everything. If we've got a scrap of paper that has something he wrote on it, we've published it.
Yeah, you've got a book of all his doodles, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be like having Pablo Picasso's kindergarten finger paintings.
Yeah, in a way.
Now,
we'd have that in there too. So yeah, it's giving you everything. Just start from the beginning, because people sometimes think like he wrote a few stories, and all of a sudden he was a success. He worked his tail end off to accomplish what he did. I mean, he was working all the time, refining his craft, and so I kind of wanted to show how much work this guy had to do to get to where he was to be a professional. Because so many people just think it's just like magic, or you'll tell me that how I got lucky on all my accomplishments, and they just want to forget about all the work that goes into something. So I want to start with Howard right at the very beginning, showing you what he had to do to develop the skills he had. And I mean, he still had to deal with a lot of frustrations like everybody. And he didn't just write something and everybody just immediately clamor to publish it. Back then he had to go through publisher after publisher. Some stuff never got published. People criticized him, saying he's a little repetitious sometimes. Well, what happened was, if he had a story that didn't sell, he might use some elements of that into another story. Well, decades go by and all this stuff gets published. You're like, well, I saw that in another one. Well, he didn't know that one was ever going to get published. And so you'll see that kind of sort of repetition. But he just had such an energetic way of telling a story. And it's so nice what Rusty and Wandering Star and Del Rey did by getting it back to his original voice, where you got that energy, that communication wasn't being all watered down. Like one place I talk about, I try not to bash on DeCamp and Carter as much as maybe me as a fan wanted to. I just kind of let him do his own talking. And there's one chapter where when Carter started or DeCamp started editing his stuff, and so I just let DeCamp's own words paint what he did. And he's like, okay, this story is still pretty much as Robert E. Howard wrote it, except for then he'll go into a whole paragraph of all the stuff he changed.
Except where it's not.
Yeah, so I just let him, dig his own grave on that one. And you're looking at okay, that's not what I would call light editing. I mean, just he just goes on a long time about all the things he's changed, like he's bragging about it. And DeCamp, he was very important to Robert E. Howard. Got about in front of a lot of people. That Lancer series, with all its flaws, I mean, they've sold in the millions, and has made Conan into a worldwide icon. So he deserves respect for that, and he was very important to the history Gosh, when you're reading the stories, it'd be 1 minute you're sipping on a fine bourbon, the next minute you've got the most watered down light beer you ever tasted.
Now, given that he did have to work so hard to become a recognized name, obviously his first works didn't rate cover illustration notoriety.
He got covers pretty quick.
He did. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was going to ask, if he didn't get cover illustration, did you still print those covers? So if he had a secondary story in Weird Tales, but it didn't make the cover, do you still print that cover in this chronology?
Yeah, but I make them smaller.
Okay.
Yeah, they're smaller. If it doesn't have a Howard feature on the cover, I'll show you the cover. So, like I say, I'm taking this from the viewpoint of you're a collector. You want to go know what to look for. Okay, here's the story I want. There's the cover for it. And you could use this as a search to go through it. Another thing I'm adding in there, I put a lot of emphasis on, is when things were first published. So if you just want to collect just the first publication, because I don't think anybody is ever going to collect everything Howard has had published. I don't know if that's physically possible. So if you just want to go first editions, like one book we'll probably be putting up on my eBay store tonight is Donald Grant's Shadows of Dreams. I didn't realize if I was working on this, like most of that was first publication poems. And that way you can decide what it is you want to go. If you want this character or that character, you'll know what stories where he appears. And you'll know what the cover of the book is that you're looking for.
So Rusty, you had to have quite a depth of Robert E. Howard experience here to assist in this project and make it happen. Were all of the covers extant to the point where you could find them for reproduction? I mean, is there anything that's like it's lost to history because nobody kept a copy of this book?
I don't think so. Michael's been doing all the compiling, so he would speak to that more readily than I would, but I can't think of any Robert E. Howard publication, or first publications where it simply no longer exists.
Yeah.
Michael, what kind of a hunt was it?
Yeah. If it's been published, it's available. It didn't used to be, but it's been a lifetime of collecting all these things and all these images, to get the start on this. I mean, I could have said 2 years ago, I want to do this and then started gathering materials. If I hadn't already been collecting them all my life, I couldn't pull this thing together like I did. And but it's when I started on this project, my starting point was with a book called The Last Celt, published by Donald Grant, which was a bibliography by his agent. And
Lord.
In there, you go through what Glenn Lord wrote about, what was lost and what was around. And in there, he was discussing all these things that were lost that have since been found. So that was a great starting point for me to have a full appreciation of just how much people have, searched things out. Like he had this 3-issue self-published or self-typed, would be a better way to say it, publication called The Right Hook about boxing stories and poetry like that. And during I think last time, I think those were lost. Well, they've since been found. And, so different things like that. There's still stuff on his original manuscripts that they know from his agent, Otis Adelbert Klein, that, okay, we wrote this story because it's on Klein's list that he was trying to market for Howard, but that story's been lost. So some of his original work is still gone, may never be recovered, including, like, I think he won an award for a poetry thing that was, or not poetry, but an essay done in a publication that he got. It might have been actually his first byline, but nobody's got a copy of it. So, some of that work, that's probably about the only thing really in print that nobody's got a copy of that, but that was back to his amateur days. But most
maybe you can find maybe you can find a snippet of something he wrote someday and help him finish it, like you did with Edgar Rice Burroughs and Tarzan and the Mysterious She.
Well, they've got a contract now where Cabinet's licensed a publisher to finish them out. They said they want to kind of work within canon and the license. And I've already got an idea of something I could do just about like that. I'm not going to try to pitch or mention it to anybody until I get done with this chronology first. But I do have an idea for something I could do. And, if I could do with that what I did with my Edgar Rice Burroughs story that I finished out, where nobody could tell which part was mine, which part was him. That's always been the complaint about the Conan pastiches. It was so obvious when you went away from Howard. And, people, when they do reviews of me, they say, I don't have a particular voice. I change my voice for every story I write. And, I feel like I could do that with Howard. I'd love the opportunity if I could get it, but that's a project for another day.
Yeah. Matthew Gagnon is in the chat. He says the first book, and he's referring to the video we did of the Edgar Rice Burroughs chronology. He said the first book looks like it might remind us of World's Greatest Pulpster by Dennis McHaney. Did you consult this book while working on the project? I'm guessing he means consult by, how does a art chronology kind of look and format? I mean, how did you determine the format? Did you look at other books to
It's-
say, this is how they work?
It's the same format as the Egg Rice Burroughs one, and you will see Dennis's book listed in there. I know Dennis, and he's a great guy, and he's been a very strong Robert E. Howard aficionado, and he's published a lot of Howard's work. So you're going to see him mentioned quite a few times throughout the Pulps and the books listings there. So Dennis is a part of Robert E. Howard history, and the format that I'm using is the same thing as what I used on the Egg Rice Burroughs Chronology, where basically I just kind of start out with the earliest publication, and then it's like whoever had something published first, like I would do like All Story before I did Blue Book, and but then what I do is I'll pick a series, and then I'll just do their entire run for several years, and then the next series that gets presented is going to be whatever was published next after that first date of that first book. So I do have a form that I use.
Okay.
So it's not strictly chronological. Because when he's talking about Dennis's book, I mean, he was month by month over the years. I don't do it that way. I kind of concentrate by the title, so there's a little bit more uniformity that way.
All right. This wasn't just a Google search that you did for covers. I mean, you went to you had to do some archaeology and some digging, and you own a lot of this material, as I understand it.
Yeah, if you want to hold on a second, I'll grab some stuff to show you.
Bring it on. And while you're doing that, I'll just talk to Rusty and ask him how in the world did you first get hooked up with Robert E. Howard fandom and Conan editing? Where do you come into this story initially?
Well, I first encountered Conan in the comics, the Conan the Barbarian #4, and it was probably, I'm trying to think, that would have been in 71, and it was probably almost 10 years before I even knew there was an organized Robert E. Howard fandom. Although I did pick up some of the fanzines that were going on in the 70s, like Dennis McHaney's Howard Review and Damon Sasser's Lone Star Fictioneer. No, Damon was, anyway, getting a little cloudy on the memory as I age. Two Gun Raconteur was Damon's, but there were several fanzines coming out back then, and I was doing those. But it never occurred to me that there was some kind of organized fandom until at a convention in Chattanooga. I met a couple of guys who talked to me about this amateur press group called Robert E. Howard United Press Association. And some other people had just talked me into joining a different amateur press group. And so I thought, well, what the heck, I'll join this thing. I'm still in it now. How long has it been since 1980?
Oh, too long.
41 years?
Yeah.
I'm still in Rahupa. So, and it's been really seminal to all the work that I've ever done with Howard. So many friends from Rahupa have kind of helped me with everything, and without them, the old standing on the shoulders of giants, I'm not sure I'm standing on their shoulders, but certainly we hold each other up and help each other out. So
it's a collaborative effort.
Yeah. And the Howard fandom can be very, very contentious. Robert E. Howard fans are not milquetoasts, but we do pull together when something that supports and promotes Robert E. Howard is coming. We do pull together and try to make it the best we can.
Well, they're certainly pulling together for this Kickstarter.
We were still upset about the disrespect we felt he was shown by the Camp and Carter and things like that. So, again, like I said, they were very important to making him known in the world. But yeah, they're just some things that and I'm not going to go through a list of personal gripes or anything like that, but there were things that just didn't roll the fans right. And so I think there's still a lot of that residual rolling around. I just grabbed a few things around. I've got all the weird tales with Howard stories in them. I just kind of grabbed a few. See if I catch it with good light here.
I'll give you full screen here so we can see it a little bit better.
That's the first appearance of Wolf's Head. Let's kind of grab it up. Here's Red Shadows. That's a Solomon Kane story. Here's a Conan story. Now, Conan amazingly did not happen to appear on many of his covers. It was Margaret Brundage, and she would mainly concentrate on the women. And here's one where Conan did get on the cover, but again, he's kind of like the hero in distress on this one. It's played by the damsel. And here's
he doesn't look very much at all like the Marvel version of Conan either.
No. Yeah, there was one, and I've got it back there. I didn't grab it, but where he's actually fighting with a giant snake on the cover. That was the only one where he actually looked like the Conan we envisioned. Other than that, usually the ones he was on, he was in a submissive role, you might say. So, but
I mean, the idea of the strongman has really evolved. Back then, if you look in the old comics and stuff, you look at like Charles Atlas. Charles Atlas looked nothing like the guys now, or even before. What was the guy's name? Eugen Sandow, or something like that. He wasn't ripped the way the bodybuilders are now, and that's why I've always kind of objected to that pumping iron approach to depicting Conan. I want to see a guy whose muscles look like they were developed by throwing hay bales up in a barn,
Yeah.
who used those muscles to live and to survive.
There's a difference between a total body, strength and just certain, mass strength.
It's one of the reasons I like, one of my favorites is Greg Manchess, who did the illustrations in the third volume of the Wandering Star Del Rey.
You had such good artists on that series. It was really great.
When I first saw it, I was completely unfamiliar with Greg's work before Marcelo Anciano sent me some links to some of his work. I was like, this guy draws perfect longshoremen. I mean, this guy looks like he's been lifting and toting and getting in brawls and stuff. And so I knew he could do a Conan. And my favorite Conan is the one that he designed for the slipcase for the third volume. Unfortunately, that slipcase took a while to get done, but it shows Conan kind of rock hopping up a creek, and he's got an axe in his hand, but he looks like a guy who got those muscles surviving in the woods and fighting and stuff, not a guy who was in the gym every day.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked a lot.
Smith,
go ahead.
Barry Windsor Smith did a great job of what I thought Conan should be. He wasn't bulked up kind of like he got to be when John Buscema started doing it in the comics. He was, he's drawn him as a youth and then growing into a man, and he wasn't all bulked out. And, he had muscle tone and strength, but he didn't look like a weightlifter. So it's and that's one of the things they've even discussed about Tarzan is what is the right look for Tarzan? Was he supposed to be completely ripped, or was he supposed to be somebody who could just pass it? You wouldn't even notice him if he was in the room. Artist interpretation is very important. And the series that Rusty is talking about, it's the illustrated Robert E. Howard library, where they go back and they get the authentic text as best they can. Sometimes it wasn't available, but if it was, they went back as far back, even if it was just to the Weird Tales text, and got you as unedited as they could present it. And then they went through and they got a whole bunch of really great artists. I mean, if there's, and this is something I talk about in the chronology, was that if there's one way that you want to be introduced to Robert Howard's writing and read him, that is the series. Wandering Star started about these great illustrated, super deluxe hardcover series. They were being reprinted by Del Rey. Towards the end of the series, it was just coming out from Del Rey, because Del Rey at one point they were doing hardcovers too, and then paperback. The latter volumes were just paperback only. But that's the set you want to get if you really want to appreciate Robert E. Howard. I get that set that Rusty edited. I mean, that is the set to get. Wonderful illustrations, great packaging, and the right stuff as far as the stories.
And that set is called what again?
Rusty?
The full title is the Robert E. Howard Illustrated Library of Classics. But I don't think Del Rey actually used that when they started coming out. It's just the Del Rey Wandering Star, or the Del Rey Robert E. Howard Library.
Right.
Starts with Solomon Kane and moves on through the last one that we did was what, El Borak?
I think it was, yeah. Yeah, right. El Borak or the horror stories, one of those.
We've talked a lot about the covers that were on the Weird Tales and on the, obviously on the paperbacks and the comics, which we haven't got to yet. We have a question in the chat. Will the interior art for these stories be shown? Because it's not called a cover chronology; it's called an art chronology. So,
yes, you have the interior art. The same way I did with Thrills. Rusty's seen a few, and the header art. And one thing is, I don't try to tell you about the stories. Give you my version of the stories. What I'll do is I'll let the story be described by the editor's little copy blurb that they would always put, along with the title and the what we call header art, which was the illustration that went with the title. And so you would get to see that too.
Okay,
it's like
so there you go, Matthew. You'll have the you'll have the interior art, which, being black and white ink, sometimes you get greater detail than you did on a cover that's been colored over. Very cool. So I'm trying to think where to go next with this, because I know my introduction to Conan was, I think, pretty much the same as Rusty's, which was the comic book. What was the impact of the Conan comic books on fandom? I mean, was it, hey, yay, we get more Conan, or was it, this kind of J curve of introducing new fans?
I know when I was reading the original Conan stories, I would turn my nose up when I saw advertisements for the Marvel. I didn't read any Marvels. I was reading the Goki and the Dells, because they had the painted covers where Marvel had line drawn art that was just colored in. And when I started seeing advertisements for Conan on the racks, and it was the John Buscema very house style art, it's like, nah, I don't want to. I have enough of the passages as it is. I didn't want that. Then I found Conan #9 on the shelf of a comic spinner rack. Barry Windsor Smith art adapting The Garden of Fear by Robert E. Howard. So you had good core material. You had the wonderful Barry Windsor Smith art. And I was like, wow, really? And, actually, I take that back. That was the second experience I had. My first one was Savage Tales #1, where you had adaptation, again, of a Robert E. Howard story, Gods of the North, the Frost Giant's Daughter, which is, I sort of got separated out into two different stories. Gods of the North is another character, Amra. But the Robert E. Howard Frost Giant's Daughter adaptation by Barry Windsor Smith. And I mean, it was just wonderful, intricate, detailed pencil art. It hadn't been inked. And I was like, oh, I better give it another look. And then I checked out the Conan the Barbarian #9, and I was just hooked from that point on. Like, okay, I got to go back and find these older ones there. So that's how I got introduced to it. And then, unfortunately, Barry went away. And then I got John Buscema. He's a good storyteller. But
Buscema was a very good art. Buscema was a good artist. I have no objection to his.
Yeah, the thing about the difference going from Barry to Buscema, though, with Barry, as Conan would move around Hyperborea, had different architectures from different cities. When you got John, it was like every city looked the same.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. Barry had a more exotic. He was influenced by the pre-Raphaelites, so he had this more ornate kind of style, and even his sense of movement was different than like that. Down here in the corner there, that picture from cover from Conan the #1. That's just not a pose that John Buscema would have done.
No, you're right. Yeah, and John was working for a living. He was drawing several books a month. Barry, that was his book. So there's a difference between a guy who he was just doing it for the sake of the art more than the paycheck, and a guy who started supporting a family. And
actually, John wanted that book to start with. Roy, I think Roy Thomas had approached him, but Roy's budget for the books, Martin Goodman had only given him X amount of money, and Roy's budget wouldn't cover John's per page fee.
Yeah.
And so he had to go with a cheaper artist. So he went with Barry. So I think it was kind of a labor of love for John. And I've heard that he didn't much care for Alfredo Alcala's inks. He thought they busied his work up too much, and I thought they were lovely.
I love. Yeah, that was my favorite part of John's work, was when Alfredo Alcala inked him up in Savage Sword of Conan. I thought that was my favorite thing.
Yeah, John apparently liked really simple. He liked it when his brother Sal inked him, or Joe Sinat or somebody like that, who basically inked his pencils and didn't add a lot of detail. Personally, I liked all the detail. I don't know if you remember the splash page to Black Colossus in Savage Sword of Conan was just absolutely beautiful. Conan's looking out. It's jungle-like. And it's not Conan, it's Shavadas is looking out, and he sees this city out in the desert in front of him, and it's just gorgeous.
But that's like I said,
that's
great
all
story. Yeah, it's kind of like going back to the Tarzan thing. I got hooked on Tarzan with Russ Manning art, and when Russ Manning went away, I wasn't happy with any artist after that. Now I went back and looked at him again when I was doing the Burroughs chronology. I was like, some of these guys are pretty darn good. So as a fan, if it isn't what you wanted, you're not going to be happy with it. And so there was a little bit of that for me, because I just love Barry's work so much. Yeah,
I think the only way I can relate to that is that is coming out a decade or a generation younger, when George Perez left the New Teen Titans, that was my parallel. It's like, yep, it's no good anymore. No one can draw the same way.
Yeah.
Now, you are reproducing the Marvel Comics covers in here, and obviously not all of the Marvel Comics Conans were Robert E. Howard adaptations, because eventually they ran out of stories and they wanted to continue making money. So Roy Thomas started writing some stuff, and other people. So you're not. You've got a cutoff, I'm guessing, for which Marvel covers you're reproducing.
No, I'm going to show them all.
You're going to show them all, even if Robert E. Howard didn't write the story.
I mean, it's still his character, so I'm going to give you all the Conan series, all the covers, all the reprints, all the collections. I mean, I'm going to give it everything. I mean, if it's got Conan on the cover and it was in a comic book format, you're going to get it.
So we're going to get some Avengers covers.
I'm sorry.
So we're going to get some Avengers covers then.
Now that part I may have to do with the book size, where you get them real small, so I don't.
Little postage stamp.
Catalog. But I'm going to contact Marvel, see if I can get permission. But I want to try to show them all. I mean, everything. And the one thing I won't be able to show is, and this is not really a Robert Howard character the way it appears in the comics, is the Red Sonja. That's another license. So I won't be showing any of the Red Sonja line of comics.
That's exactly what Robert Roberts was just asking, was any Red Sonja Conan covers, because they appeared together in a movie, and it makes people think that they're the same creators, but they're not.
If Conan's name comes first, I can show it. If Red Sonja's name comes first, the only way I'd be able to show it is if it's, like I said, little catalog type of little tiny pictures.
Red Sonja's first appearance, of course, was in Conan the Barbarian, number 24. And that one was, her original appearance was based on the Robert E. Howard story, Shadow of the Vulture, where there's a character named Red Sonja, but it's spelled with a Y.
With a Y and not a J.
Yeah.
And that was
so that character is loosely based on this Robert E. Howard concept. But back when Paradox, now Cabinet Entertainment, back when they acquired the rights to the Robert E. Howard properties, one of the things that had happened is Red Sonja Corporation had gotten split off from the others. It's an independent entity now.
Right.
And so, as Michael's saying, the licensing for any Red Sonja has to go through them. It's a completely different company.
So what was the licensing like for this? Because, I mean, all the Weird Tales and stuff, that's got to be public domain at some level. But these Marvel covers, none of them can be considered public domain at this point. Is this a fair use issue, or did you have to pay some sort of a fee?
Cabinet Group, the Conan properties. That's why, when they did a license with Dark Horse, all of a sudden Dark Horse could publish all the Marvel stuff. And then now that Marvel has the license, they can publish the Dark Horse stuff. I mean, that's owned by them. All the other pulps, there's some rights I still probably have to work out. There's one guy who had the rights on a lot of stuff. I already got an agreement with him, because I had to get an agreement with him on some of the pulps for the Edgar Rice Burroughs chronology. So, there's some rights I have to get permission on. Some rights are public domain. Some rights, that are held by, cabinets. And there's some rights that we're just not sure about and still trying to figure out.
Well, you've worked with a lot of these pulp characters and reproductions, and Robert's asking a question that comes up. This comes up often, especially as we start seeing characters like Superman and Batman and the Shadow start to flirt with this borderline of public domain. What is public domain really, and how do they, like he says, how do they have rights over 1920s authors' creations?
If it's 1924 before, a lot of that is in the public domain. Like even a lot of the Burroughs original novels are in public domain. However, there's two different things we're talking about here. The copyrights being in public domain, as far as the text, but then you have trademarks. That's a whole horse of a whole other feather there. Like Tarzan is a trademark name. John Carter of Mars is a trademark name. Samaria is a trademark name. Conan is a trademark name. So, at some point, some of these stories maybe have or will fall into public domain, but you can't, you may be able to reprint them, but you can't advertise the name and the title because that's a trademark name.
Right.
So I think people get in trouble on that.
This was settled by a court case many years ago about Sherlock Holmes. and the courts decided that because the character had gone into the public domain, you could publish any Sherlock Holmes story that you want, but you can't put Sherlock Holmes. You can't put Sherlock Holmes in the Hound of the Baskervilles. You can publish it as the Hound of the Baskervilles with Sherlock Holmes' name in.
Right. Yeah, I could write a story about
the story itself is public domain. But if you then try to use the character of Sherlock Holmes, then you got to deal with whoever claims. And then, of course, that one's probably a bad example to use because there's like competing copyright or competing rights claims.
Yeah, the Conan Doyle estate still kind of controls that.
But with Howard, any of his stuff, much of the world, this is the thing that confuses people too, especially people who aren't in the States. In most of the world, 70 years after the author's death, his work becomes public domain, no matter when it was published. But in the United States, it's different rules. And Congress, aided by money from Walt Disney Corporation and others, has kept extending those copyright and trademark kind of deadlines. But now it's pretty well set that each year, this year it's 1924, next year it'll be 1925. And so slowly things are starting to come back into the public domain.
Right.
So
frame it another way, it's like, a name, like you could use a name. Like I could write a story about a guy named Tarzan fighting a guy named Conan. I can't use those names in the title of the story. I can't use the actual characters, but the names, you can have people name them. So, there's a lot of little, yes, you can do this, but you can't do that. You got to know where the barriers are. I know there were people who thought that some of Howard's stories were in the public domain, tried to publish stories where they would rewrite a group of stories into a whole new narrative, and then find out, I can't do that. And now those are very limited books that not in print anymore. So.
Yeah, there's this belief, and whether it's correct or not, I can't say, but that they're like, well, if a story has fallen into the public domain, say again, like I'll just use Superman as an example, even though it's not, 1938 isn't passed yet, but that as soon as that or Batman's even better example. If Batman has fallen into the public domain by 10 years. The belief is that you can write a Batman comic book if you're only using elements that are in those first 10 years that have fallen into the public domain, and you don't call the book Batman. You can call the character Batman, and you can have, say you have Commissioner Gordon in there, that's okay because he was there, but if you throw in the Batmobile and it didn't come out till 2 years later, that's a no-no. You're now out of your safety element. I don't know. I wouldn't want to mess with it myself because it just seems like too much of a landmine to step on if it's not clearly all public domain.
The question I keep asking people, about who are considering things like that is, are you willing to fight so-and-so's legal department?
Yeah.
If you got the money to go to court, go ahead, have at it.
Yeah. I had a conversation with Bob Ingersoll, who was a lawyer, about, and Michael, you were part of this story because it was I was asking him about characters in multiple comic books that have the same name and the trademark issues that we would discuss before. I was like, DC and Marvel, they both have a Sandman character. DC and Marvel, they both had a Captain Marvel at one point. And I asked him, I said, so technically, and by the way, they both had a Sabretooth as well. Technically, DC, I said, could publish a book called Arachnid Stories with a character called the Spider-Man in it. And he's like, technically they could. It would cost them a few $1 million in court to be proven right. So eventually it's do you want to be right or do you want to make money?
Yeah, kind of like the Champions. There was a company that said, hey, Champions has fallen in public domain. Marvel's abandoned it. They spent so much money fighting with Marvel. By the time they did win their lawsuit, they were bankrupt, out of business. Yeah,
it just invites the lawsuit. So, this is true, Harlan. They also both have an Enchantress. Which is why a lot of times on the toys, and some of the books you'll see now. And I thought it was funny when it happened to Marvel because Marvel's pulled it on so many other people. It's Marvel's Avengers on all the toys now because the Steed and Peel folks said,
Yep.
we've trod this ground first. It's ours.
Yeah,
I
of
just
course, it's a tricky thing, and you got to fight to maintain the protection of your trademarks. So that's why people are so fast to defend them, because if you don't, you lose them.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. Harlanberg's also brought up the fact that you guys should possibly plan on doing some traveling promotion next year to go to Pulp Fest in Cranberry, Pennsylvania. Is this something on you guys' radar to promote the book in ways other than online?
Pulp Fest is on my radar every year. Unfortunately, this year my wife's high school reunion interferes with going there, but anytime I can go to Pulp Fest, I look forward to doing it. It's a wonderful, wonderful convention. Great guys. So I'll volunteer to take it up there.
I have never been to Pulp Fest. I've always wanted to be. As RJ knows, for 40 years I've had 2 stores. And so I didn't just have an anchor keeping me here in the Little Rock area. I had 2 anchors. And I 1 week vacation in the last 21 years. I mean, it's just, I just do nothing but work, and I can never get away from the stores. Now that I no longer have the stores, now I'm working on these, the Chronology, and I'm also doing all my Wild Stars novels. So right now I'm just jumping on it. And, it's like I wanted to go to the Howard days, but I thought they'd canceled them this year. By the time I realized, it's still going, it was too late to go. So I'm going to try to make that next year. And I want to
next year you'll have product.
Get a little bit more freed up.
Yeah, and next year, of course, you'll have product to sell too, instead of just being there as an attendee. You can you'll have quite a hot commodity, I would think, among the collectors.
Oh yeah,
and fans.
having the show people really changes it. It's like I did make an Egg Rice Burroughs a convention, and I had a prototype of my Burroughs Chronology to show, and everybody was trying to tie those prototypes away from me so bad. And so finally, people that can I buy these? I would be like, no, I got to keep these to show. And they're like, no. I mean, when can I buy these? And so I mean, it's great to show them. I know, like with the Wild Stars comics I published, I did Orlando Con like 2 years in a row. And the first year I just had a couple of them. I did real well. Well, the next year I had the whole set of the volume 3 finished, 1 through 7. And of course, the number 7 was like a triple-sized issue. And with a complete story there to sell, I sold everything I took with me. It was a 3-day convention. I was sold out in the middle of the second day. I had sold every bit of product I had. And so having something to show people, and especially a completed project, is a lot better than I'm going to do this or I'm working on that. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just want to give you guys a little bit of an update on where you're at. You are so close to flirting with that $50,000 stretch goal being broken open now.
Wow.
You're at 45,007 and 10 with 175 backers. It would be really cool if you guys hit the stretch goal on my show. I would love that.
We're trying. Hey,
how long can you stay on the air?
There you
well,
go.
I'll tell you, Rusty. It wasn't that long ago that I stayed on the air 12 hours.
Okay, well, you'll do that without me.
Yeah, I did a marathon Saturday of 12 one-hour shows back to back with 12 different creators highlighting their stuff, and we did Podcast Palooza. And I should do that again sometime, especially now that I'm monetized now, and I wasn't then. So it's a totally different ballgame.
Hey, do you have access there to go to my website?
I do have access to go to your website, and I will, if my mouse will start cooperating with me. We did just post the link up to it there. And by the way, the link to the Wild Stars is also the second link in the description below this video. So be sure to click that and find more.
You probably want to take a look first at the Robert E. Howard Chronology, because I got a lot of images up there I don't think they used on the Kickstarter. I was creating all sorts of images for them, and I was busy this week doing up to 5 o'clock in the morning making images. And I don't even show them all on there, but yeah. So scroll down a little bit there, because first you're going to be talking about my Wild Stars.
So when you get to this page, you're at the right spot.
Yeah, that's the right website. Yeah. And, I was working at 5 o'clock in the morning coming up with images, and I couldn't tell you how many different versions I worked up of the covers, and I just lost track of them all. But a lot of the different images to give them something to show that I worked up, that they didn't use, I've got on here. So there's my Wild Stars role-playing game. There's my latest novel, Wild Stars, being serialized right now, getting great reviews.
It's taking a little while to load, so I'm
on the City Council All Mail, and so I got a page on there. That's one of my biggest hit pages. And there we go. So
all right. Yes.
Now, the first part's going to be a lot of what you've already seen. I got where people can keep track of the kick tracker. And that you've already shown there. So,
Right.
but when you get down below that, you'll get to some other images.
And by the way, this is three volumes in a slipcase.
No,
For those
4.
who weren't quite aware of that.
4
Oh,
volumes.
there's 2 comic volumes.
Oh, 4 volumes.
Yeah,
Okay. Oh,
that comic-
part 1 and part 2. Yeah.
There's been a lot of comments.
Yeah, Rusty, I got a question for you. Is it Bellet or Belit?
I've always said Belit.
Yeah, I said too. On the show, or on the commercial, they were saying Bellet. So I was like, have I been wrong all this time?
Well, none of us really know how Robert E. Howard pronounced it. So
Yeah.
Does Vampirella know that she stole her costume?
um,
So keep on
Howard-
going down a little bit.
Howard wrote it Belit. Farnsworth Wright, the editor of Weird Tales, put a circumflex over the I. So I'm not all that conversant with it, but I think that makes the pronunciation Belit.
Oh, and speaking
Maybe,
of
maybe
champions,
one of our listeners knows more about how that circumflex affects the pronunciation.
I know
yeah,
I was
is
at-
it Bellet or Belit, folks?
I was at the,
Looks like Heroic is still publishing Champions, according to their website. So they're working on funding issue number 68 featuring Tigress.
Oh, good for them. Now, I think that's somebody after the lawsuit. I'm not sure, but yeah, and I know there's been no Champions comics. Yeah, keep on scrolling down. You get to see some of the other covers that didn't make it into Kickstarter.
Yeah, no, I just
know-
keep stopping because of the male gaze forces me to stop on that first cover all the
I
time.
got you. I don't
It's
know.
just, it's like that's like let's make a poster of that one. There's a stretch goal for you, 24 by 30 poster. Just
You like the Brundage ladies, huh?
yeah.
You get to see them all, and all those Brundage ladies will be full page size in the chronology.
Lovely. There's reason enough to back this project, folks. So yeah, these are images here of Fantastic Mysteries, the Weird Tales, Oriental Stories. Wow, you wouldn't find a book called that these days.
No, you wouldn't. It was a different world back then. I mean,
Well, and of course,
successful then.
what they meant by Oriental was anything Asian. So, or a lot of Oriental stories would have been what we would today call the Middle East. They called the Orient.
Yeah, that's true. You'd have like Black Cathay. God, where that just puts me in. Yeah, that puts me in mind of Arion or no Arak, the DC comic. They was always trying to find White Cathay, and now I know where they got it from. They just kind of stole it from here. More Weird Tales.
Talk about pronunciations of names. I was down at the 1978 World Fantasy Convention, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, I had like an hour conversation with Stephen King. Didn't know who I was talking to. We were just shooting the breeze, and I met Harlan, Ellison, guys like that. But during that convention, Fritz Lieber, great science fiction writer, did a reading of Phoenix on the Sword because it was a Howard event, and I even gave an award to Glenn Lord that year. And so I got a kick because I was learning how to say certain names, because I'd always said Stygia. Well, he was saying Stygia and things like that. But during that convention, during that reading, it was kind of a big open air room, very poor acoustics. So he didn't have a very good speaker. And the people who were there in attendance, they were just chattering away. And I was on the back row. I got there late, like I almost always do to everything. And I was having a hard time to hear him. And I was kind of getting mad at the crowd. Well, the next guy who was going to do a reading was Harlan Ellison. And anybody who met Harlan Ellison knows where this is going, because he had just written a story. And he said, look, I haven't had a chance to copyright this. So whatever you do, no recordings. So Harlan Ellison starts. Well, he only gets a couple of sentences. He's like, hey, you in the front row. You got something so blankly blank important. Say it to everybody, other shut the blank up. So he starts again. Next thing you know, a couple more sentences, then he's down off the podium, out in the crowd, grabs the guy's tape recorder, pulls the tape out, throws it on the ground, smashes it with a foot, said, I told you no bleeping recordings. Harlan goes to start a third time, and my God, you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, he whipped that crowd into shape. And after the way they treated Fritz, I just loved every second of it. I mean, and those people, their eyes were straight ahead. They were afraid to turn their head because they might, it might look back. I'm talking. I better keep my eyes straight ahead. And I mean, he whipped that crowd to shape better than any third grade teacher with a ruler ever did.
I had the opportunity to interview Harlan Ellison, and we set it up at a con. I went outside and called my friend. I'm like, I'm gonna be talking to Harlan Ellison. What do you want to ask? He's like, just batten down your hatches, pal. because you're not ready for this interview, and I wasn't. I asked a question about time management and being able to write so many stories, and the first response the video's on this channel if you dig back into history. It's one of the earliest interviews on here, and he looks at me after that first question. He says, "Well, that's a stupid question." I'm like, I knew it wouldn't be, but I had to ask it anyway. Yeah,
He was blunt. I saw him lose his temper a couple of times at that convention, but each time he was actually justified. Like I had a dealer's table, and he was shopping at my table and had a lot of Robert E. Howard stuff on it. And these couple ladies at the table next to me, they were there as artists showing their prints. Well, they got to talking, and the restaurant was bad food. And they're like, "Well, we heard the food's so bad, Harlan Ellison is going to call the health department." Well, Harlan's heads up, turns like, "Hey, lady." They don't hear him. I'll tell you another thing Harlan said a little bit louder. "Hey, lady." He keep on saying, "I'll tell you another thing Harlan said." Why did he just scream, "Hey, lady," so loud the whole room went quiet. Everybody turns to look, and he proceeded to chew them up one side, down the other. But don't use people's names in vain if you don't know they actually said what they said. Stormed out of the double door, just boom, mad. And I'm thinking, boy, this girl's going to be crushed for life. And she turned to her friend, trembling, grabbed her by the arm, and with a big grin goes, "Did you hear Harlan chew me out?" It made her day. And then later, and Harlan was a good guy about it. Later, we were all having dinner at a local pizza place because we were not eating at that restaurant. It was really bad. Let's put it this way. The restaurant was named after the street address, the 666 Club. And the food was from hell. So we were at the little pizza place, and it was just a dive. I mean, you had boards on barrels. Those were the benches. And Harlan, he ran with gangs. Well, he walks by those two girls and very deftly reaches over and lifts her wallet out of her purse. She doesn't see it. Well, he's making a big, obvious show. Hey, everybody, look, I'm not trying to steal this. I'm playing a joke on her. Sets it down at the table because he was eating the same table as I was and several other people. And finally, he can't wait any longer for her to notice it's gone. And so, he's got to go do a show or something, some panel. And so finally, and he missed the good show because when the girl finally does realize her wallet's gone, she stands up. "Oh my God, my wallet's gone." Well, remember, these were just boards on barrels. Well, it was like the seesaw thing. One person gets off, the other person just dumped on the ground and let her, "Hey, Harlan," he lifted it as a joke. He didn't touch it, didn't get into it. It's sitting right here in plain sight. Everybody's had a good eye on it. So, so she took it well. He was joking with her. So, he would get mad at people, but he wouldn't hold a grudge. So, at least my limited experience there. But, I really enjoyed watching him whip that crowd into shape after they were just so rude to Fritz.
Yeah, he was tough but fair. His wife's great too. Susan Ellison is. You don't want to mess with her either, though.
Don't suffer fools.
No, she does not. I saw Susan because I was talking with Susan setting the interview up, and she's like Mary Poppins because she's British, and she's very stern, but she's very friendly. Then they had the line for signings with Harlan Ellison. And they were like, okay, well, he's got to go to a panel, so we need to cut the line off. So Susan goes out and puts a place in line, says, "Okay, we're cutting it off here." Well, she doesn't have on a convention volunteer badge. She's just got regular. And the guy that she cut off was like, "Well, who are you to be? You don't work for the convention. You can't say this kind of stuff." And she looked at the 5 people behind him and said, You, and you can come up and do this. You're never getting up there." and he found out who she was, and it was like, yep, she's got a little bit of Harlan in her too. And I watched that. That was hilarious. The guy was just crestfallen was an understatement of it. These Weird Tales, this is they really let it all hang out when they published these covers back then.
They were pretty controversial at the time. In fact, there's urban legend or whatever that one of the Weird Tales issues was that got banned, if you will, or that the post office refused to mail it out. I don't think that was true, but they were certainly controversial, even among the Weird Tales readers.
Because I don't know if she's wearing bangles on her breastises or not there, but it's just you wouldn't expect to see this unobstructed on a shelf today in a bookstore. You would see like the black bar across the shelf blocking everything out.
What I do is I take some of those images like you're seeing. I'll scan my copy in and then Photoshop clean it up to make it look like as if you bought it brand new off the shelf. I don't want to show you an old wear and tear with all the age of years on it. I want you to
Oh, yeah.
see what the image looked like when it was a brand new magazine on the shelf there.
You don't want to show them my copies.
Right.
I just get reading copies.
Now, this is the Conan picture we were talking about earlier too, where he's in the cage. It's a little bit of a better, bigger picture here. Of course, bigger to me, smallest to folks watching on the screen, I'm sure, because I got a monitor to my side here. Yeah, he's not long haired. He's not super cut. He kind of looks like almost like an everyman, a fit everyman.
Yeah. Well, if you go back even as late as the 1950s, who were the big guys in the sword and sandal flicks? It's like Steve Reeves and guys like that. They were not huge. They were not immense. They were Clint Walker. They were big guys, but they weren't pumped. They didn't.
I thought Clint Walker would have made a great Tarzan.
Oh gosh, he would have made a great too. I used to say that Clint Walker with Charles Bronson's face would have been a great Conan.
Oh, you're absolutely right about that. Charles Bronson kind of did make it on one of the Howard covers too. Vultures and Wapton by Ken Kelly. That cover. I mean, that's Charles Bronson. That's ever anybody in that Western cover.
Here on the Sonora Kid?
No, that's a different cover by Stephen Fabian. And
okay.
So, am I saying that right? Is that Stephen or Stephen?
Yeah, Stephen. Yeah,
Stephen. Okay. See, and I came from Kansas. In Kansas, that spelling would have been pronounced Stephen. So sometimes you go from one state to another, same spelling, different pronunciation.
Speaking of pronunciations, we did get a confirmation that it is Belit.
Belit.
And
okay.
the name is a nod to a female version of Baal, the male Canaanite Phoenician god. And that's the kind of information you'll get from Heroinberg when we have streams going on like this. So yeah, I don't hear too much about the Robert E. Howard Westerns. I mean, you always, he's better known, I think, for the sword and sorcery stuff, the Solomon Kane and the Conan. But yeah, he did shoot 'em ups.
Oh yeah, he was moving more in that direction. Sure.
He was only starting to really come into his own, his authentic voice in Westerns toward the end of, almost at the end of his life. Some of those early Westerns, like the Sonora Kid, they're pretty standard stuff. I don't know why they got rejected by the magazines, because they could have played in just about any Western mag. Whereas as you get further along into like the Vultures of Wahpeton, that it's starting to get to where this is genuine Robert E. Howard voice. This is not going to have a happy ending.
Yeah, and another thing you said, like we just said, Wahpeton. There people would know that by two different names. It was because it was spelled two different ways. When it was published, originally it was published as Wapetown, but that's not how Howard wrote it. And then you've corrected over the years to Wahpeton.
Oh, I get it. Yeah, it's sort of like changing Spock's color from green to Caucasian. Somebody thought, he screwed it up.
Well, the original magazine publication, they spelled it with W-H-A, but when you go back to the Otis Klein records, it's entered as W-A-H. The difference between Hui and Wah.
Yeah.
And if you look, Wahpeton is the spelling of, there was a town in, I can't remember, one of the Dakotas or Montana or someplace. It was W-A-H. So I think that's what Howard was going for.
Now, is this a fanzine reprint of the Robert E. Howard story? Because I'm seeing a $5 price sticker, and that's
one of the, Bob Price back in the 1980s had a little publishing industry going called Cryptic Publications. He published Cryptic Cthulhu, and he published a bunch of Howard chapbooks that had at that time previously unpublished Howard stories, and this was one of them. Had his previously unpublished Sonora Kid stories.
All right. And then, you've got the books here as well. So we just seen the pulps.
Muir,
tons of books.
That was the first Robert E. Howard paperback, if you don't count the Ace Double Conan the Conqueror.
Mm-hmm.
That's got that beautiful Jack Gahan cover.
Yeah, I always loved the mass market paperback format. I wish everything seems to be going into the trade paperback format these days. It's a bigger book. I like something I can stick in my back pocket.
Now, like on that one you're looking at, Tower of the Elephant, and another one just before that, what those were is Donald Grant did some big luxury editions. Conan and the Devil in Iron. Donald Grant did really nice, big, super quality deluxe library binding books, and that's where you had the contents that I think they were printed, at the time. Maybe they're extra, or maybe they printed it extra or whatever. But the contents are almost identical. There are differences to his deluxes. They just put like a paperback wrapper on it.
We got the Cull books. We forgot about Cull. He got a movie too.
I haven't even seen it yet. Probably never will.
It's been out for a while, Rusty.
I know. Just the idea of Kevin Sorbo being called, I don't know. There's something about it that makes me not want to see it.
He does have a lighthearted touch.
I hold a grudge because I read an interview with the guy who was brought on as the director, and he starts out okay, but then he says, "Oh, I know all about this character. I've read all the comics." I'm like, you haven't even read the Robert E. Ford stuff, and he probably never did.
That's Robinson moment.
Yeah, that's sort of like somebody saying, it's like, yeah, I know all about the character. I've seen both movies.
Bill Tom says I didn't miss anything, so.
Thanks, Bill. The Incredible Adventures of Dennis Dorgan. This is not one I've heard of before, and it's a very unusual cover.
Dennis Dorgan was actually just a pseudonym for Howard's boxing character Steve Costigan. When he was trying to get a Costigan story sort of repurposed to go into Oriental stories, but he didn't want to use the Costigan name because that had appeared in fight stories, and so he called him Dennis Dorgan. And he actually, I can't remember, I think he rewrote a few unsold Steve Costigan stories as Dennis Dorgan stories, but they weren't sold while he was still alive. But all the Dorgan stories are actually Steve Costigan stories.
Yeah.
It's got a very cartoony look to the art on that one too. It doesn't have the same. It doesn't exude the same kind of adventure that a Conan painting does.
Well, they're not really. The Costigan stories aren't so much. I mean, there's a little adventure to them, but they're boxing stories. Steve Costigan is a seaman on a merchant tramp steamer back in the 20s and 30s, and goes to various exotic ports, Singapore or Jakarta or whatever, and ends up having boxing matches in those, but also frequently getting into some kind of 9 times out of 10, he gets hoodwinked by some dame, it's just, they're hilarious. Some of them are absolutely slapstick. So a humorous cover really works for Costigan or Dorgan.
Yeah, Howard had better range. Everybody thinks he wrote one type of character, one type of story. Like Gates of Empire. That is definitely not a Conan-esque character in that one.
No, Giles Hobson's kind of a funny guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He reminds me a little bit. He makes me think a little bit of later one of my favorite characters, George MacDonald Fraser's Flashman, who's kind of this picaresque hero who he's a coward and a cad and a bully and a womanizer, but for some reason trying to run away from. He's present at every major British military debacle of the 19th century, and for some reason, in every one of them, he comes out with medals because he was trying to run away and somebody misinterpreted what he had done, and he ends up covered in glory. Giles Hobson makes me think very much of that kind of a character.
Yeah, Gates of Empire. It's a great story, and it's not what you would expect out of Robert E. Howard at all. No square jaw kind of character at all.
No, in fact, he's got a big beer belly, and
yeah, he still likes to drink, and he still wants to womanize. Well, he tries to womanize, but it's different. But at the same time, he's at key historical events in time, like you were talking about with Flashman, and so you have that sweep of history.
Now, this last one of the books here, it's Howard, but the image makes me think Lovecraft, and it's printed by Arkham House, so it's double Lovecraft here.
That's the first Howard book from Arkham House, 1946.
Yeah, and that's
a lovely kind of spot cover, but it doesn't look very Howardian.
No, it's Hansbach for sure. You know, Hans had his own way of doing things, but it's very colorful. And I mean, you talk about a book that's just loaded up. All those early ones, I've got the Lovecraft and the several other ones that they did all right in that same format early on in Arkham House. And I mean, they are just packed. I mean, nowadays you'd split those books out and you'd get half a dozen books out of the content that they had in that one book because it was just loaded with type. And but that's actually Howard's first American book publication. His first book publication was actually in the UK, A Jip from Bear Creek, where they're collecting a whole bunch of his mountain man stories of Breckinridge Elkins, where he took them and refashioned them into a novel and wrote new chapters and made some changes from the magazine publication and came up with a novel, A Jip from Bear Creek. And but that was published in the UK, and that is a very rare, hard to find book, and especially with a wrapper. This Arkham House stuff is a little more easy to find.
When the books get printed in different countries, and for that matter, when they get reprinted in the same country here, did they usually get reprinted with the same cover, or did they get new covers painted? And do you have to, say, hey, here's King Conan, and here's all 17 covers that it was printed under?
Well, that's where you want to go buy an art chronology, which will show you all the different covers and how they change the artists. And later printings will do a new cover. Yeah, so that's what
in the paperback. The Howard stuff got. Even the same company would publish a Howard paperback with different covers.
Yeah.
Probably to try to fool people into thinking they didn't have that one already.
Oh, yeah. Well,
there's a lot of that.
I collect the Destroyer novels because I'm writing on that series now, the Warren Murphy stuff. And I've seen, I always look. I have to carry a spreadsheet around with me. Say, do I have this one in the research library? Yes, I do. No, I don't. Because you can't tell by the covers anymore. Those Hector Garrido covers were great, and then they, started redoing some of the other ones when Golden Eagle took. Yeah, I understand how they get redone.
Glenn Lord would actually write to some of us. This is back in the 80s and 90s. Glenn tried to collect, try to find every paperback, but of course, a lot of people, particularly in Europe, they were publishing stuff and not letting Glenn or the rights holders know that they were doing so. So he's looking for copies of these books, and he always included the first line of the text because you couldn't tell just from the title and the cover whether this was the story. And when he was looking for some of Howard's stuff was published in the pulps under pseudonyms because the pulp companies didn't want to pay to for the reprint rights, so they would just give a house name to the story.
That's a little.
That's kind of low, but that's business as usual in the pulp era. And so when Glenn was looking for one of those kind of things, he'd say, "Here's the first paragraph" or something, so that you could identify it.
Yeah, I helped the Burroughs people identify a UK edition that wasn't authorized. They paid for one version, but they did both hardcover and paperback. And my chronology was like, "Oh, you got that wrong. They only did this one." I was like, "No, I've got them both." And so they were immediately on to the publisher going, "Hey, what about this?" So yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
So now we entered the comics. Wow. And there had to. I would think there'd be more comic covers than there were book covers. Am I wrong on that one? Because it just seems like it's been running so long in comics.
Oh, there's hundreds of comic covers, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there must be a lot more than book covers, yeah.
And obviously, it's, you've got the number one right there on the cover, and it'll be on the inside. So you've got the Marvel books here. You got the Dark Horse books. That's a powerful image where they got him nailed up there.
That's a great Joe Kubert there.
Oh yeah.
Here's Belle-Elite.
Yeah, like I said, I looked at him like, oh, it's Vampirella, just because I'm looking at the costume. And I'm surprised that Dynamite hadn't found a way to do that kind of a crossover because, didn't Dynamite have some? Well, Dynamite's got Red Sonja,
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, when I
We
was
got
doing the Burroughs Chronology, we had to work out a licensing agreement with Dynamite because they did so many covers that first weren't licensed and then later were, and you had to work that out to be able to include all those.
oh boy, uh, Bloodstar. That looks like almost like a superhero character.
That's a
What?
great Richard Corbin cover. Bloodstar's kind of a takeoff story of Valley of the Worm rewritten. They did a couple different versions of it.
But Richard Corbin, of course, always liked to draw people completely naked. So
Yeah.
that's
Okay, so I'm looking at this Dark Horse book, Pigeons from Hell. That doesn't sound like a Robert E. Howard title.
oh, absolutely, it's one of his best.
Yeah, that's a great story.
That's a horror story.
Yeah.
So and Joe Lansdale got to translate it or adapt it.
Yeah. Pigeons, to us, particularly those of us who are urban dwellers, pigeons don't sound very sinister, but Howard was writing about, the story is set in the piney woods in the region around Louisiana and East Texas over there. So it's kind of swampy. It's dark, the pine woods. And back then, the pigeons would have been like carrier pigeons or something. And the idea was they would roost in this house, and when they would all fly up, when people came or whatever, they would all fly up and it would scare the heck out of you. So to people in the 30s, pigeons would have meant something different than they mean to us today. It doesn't sound all that scary, but it's a hell of a, it's one of the, Stephen King even called it one of the great horror stories of the 20th century.
Yeah, they even did it on a kind of like a playwright, live action TV episode one time. I forget the show.
That's right.
I can't think of it either.
Thriller. Boris Karloff's Thriller.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just more Cull, more Thulsa Doom, and then of course these were the better Conans in the comics, from my personal opinion. Where it wasn't the comic, but it was the magazine.
Yeah.
I felt like they were a little less restrained in what they had to edit.
They were very much less restricted, and they also they were kind of like anthologies, so you would have 2 or 3 stories in the same book rather than just one. And you would have backup stories. You know, it'd be Conan, but you'd have a backup story that was Cull and another one that was Red Sonja or whatever.
And this is Savage Sword of Conan, you guys viewers probably don't recognize because it was made in the UK. And,
yeah, 8 pence.
Yeah, and what was really wild, a couple of things about this, especially because that's the last section I've still got to research. So actually, I've got a lot of that chapter written already. But since I know what I'm going to be doing on the American comics, I'm having to still do research on the UK comics, and since that being the end, I'm working on it now. But the Conan comic book was actually bigger than the magazine. Now they did a second series called Savage Sword of Conan that was the same size as the Savage Sword magazine in the U.S., but in the comic was actually larger, not quite tabloid size, but close. But what was unique about it, and I mean, I love these things when I found them, and you'll be showing it here in a minute. But they took Barry Windsor Smith art. You got to see it inked, no grayscale or color. I mean, they went back to the original inked artwork, and it's a treat to behold. And when you scroll down a bit, you get to see, like the first thing you'll see below that is the header art for when the Tower of the Elephant ran in Weird Tales. It wasn't featured on the cover, but so here you have the interior art, and then when you go below that, there you can see a page of Barry Windsor Smith adapting part of the story, and it just, the art's so clean, and that is an art book where they need to go back and collect all that Barry Windsor Smith art from those 18 books into an art book. I mean, you just can't get art like that here in America, but you can in the UK. The books themselves are not that expensive. The shipping is another story.
Right.
Oh yeah. Talk to me more about shipping some other time. Yeah, and for the folks in the chat who asked earlier if you were going to be printing all the interior artwork from the pulps, I think the answer is yes to the pulps. Obviously not yes to the comic books, because you'd just be reprinting all the comic books and it would be this omnibus of artwork.
Marvel does that, yeah. So you get those from Marvel now, or old Dark Horse collection. So they're out there other ways. I'm just going to give you a different tour.
And so and here's of course the announcement that you're coming to.
Now you get to see a couple of the actual pages when you go down.
Oh, okay, cool. So, the apparition in the prize ring. Did a ghost
So you
help
get to see what the
win
cover.
this savage fight?
Yeah, so you don't see, since it wasn't a hard cover, it's not a large cover. It's a little bit larger than it normally is because I had more space, but you get to see the interior art that went with it.
Now, okay, so this says it's by John Tatterell. Is that a pseudonym?
It was Ghost Stories had a editorial policy that stories were supposed to be told in the first person. So they took the name of the boxer's manager and they made it the name of the author. And so that's Howard never used that pseudonym again, but
Okay.
it was just one of the magazine's policies. It's a
And
nice
the
story.
story was lost. The story was lost a long time because people didn't realize it was a Howard story.
You have a knack for finding these lost stories, Michael. You're like an archaeological librarian.
Yeah, that was found by Glenn Lord. They said they knew there was a story that ran in the magazine, but I think it was till the 60s before they actually identified what the story was.
Yeah.
So, then you got this is a pulp cover here, not the
Yeah.
Right. And that's what Michael's done with a lot of covers that are Howard covers. Is they're done full page.
Yeah.
Right.
The Puritan Solomon Kane. 25 cents for a lot of story there.
I'll take 4.
Yeah.
And that was one of Howard's only novels. I mean, he did two too. I'm working, that wasn't finished while he was alive, but the Hour of the Dragon, that was a full-length Conan novel, and that was. I remember when he came out with that Rosetta cover. That just blew me away. That was my first experience with it. This is interior art that I don't think has ever been printed before, ever reprinted since it came out in the first pulp. And so I've been finding a lot of that interior art that nobody's seen since its first publication. So you get to see that stuff too. I haven't tracked all those down, but I've tracked down a lot of them.
That again, Mark Adam is one of the house names that Howard's boxing stories were reprinted under when Fight Stories started back again.
Okay, so Mark Adam could have been the author on several different authors' works.
Yeah, he was, exactly.
Yeah, don't go buy a whole bunch of pulp fight stories with Mark Adam writing. They're not all going to be by Howard. Only a few.
There's the cover for the Iron Man, and some more interior artwork for Mountain Man.
Mountain Man's an interesting example of something that Howard did a lot. When he tried to break into a new kind of fiction, in this case, he's trying to break into magazines writing humorous Western stories. But he starts off with something that he's comfortable with. He had years of experience writing boxing stories, so he takes his character Breckenridge Elkins, and he ends up making the central focus of the story a boxing match between him. It's a case of mistaken identity. These things the Breckenridge Elkins stories are hilarious. But there's this case of mistaken identity, and they take this raw backwoods boy, Breckenridge Elkins, and they put him up against a pugilist from back east, and he gets into rough and tumble. It's funny as heck, but that's why you see a boxing picture on a Western story.
Yeah, and Howard, that was one of the things I really liked about the way he experimented with mixing genres. You had, it wasn't just a Western, it wasn't just a horror, it was a horror Western, weird Westerns. Then he, sword and sorcery, he created that whole genre. I mean, he was mixing and matching, he was experimenting as a writer. That goes back to how much he labored as a youth, to develop his craft, and he was always trying new things, and there's a few times he just hit home runs.
Well, there's a ton of stuff in this book. I think we've probably just scratched the surface of it. I was thinking Mountain Man kind of reminded me of Bonanza, just this Western family that's telling a little bit of humorous tale with action in it. So I wonder how much they borrowed.
Cartwright, yeah, he's just this big old raw bone backwoods guy who doesn't have much experience with civilization, and he's always getting in trouble.
Well,
when we talk about civilization, he's going into the settlements, and it might be a settlement of 45 people, but to him, it's a big city, you know.
Yeah. It would have been nice to see $700 more come in on this. $709 more to be exact.
I've got no complaints. It's done fantastically well. I had no idea it was going to do this well. I'm very happy with it.
Well, it's not even 24 hours yet, so I don't know what time today did you launch this? Was it midnight?
Well, officially it was 10 o'clock this morning, but at 1 o'clock Central Time, they did go ahead and open the doors and take it live. That way, anybody who had signed up, notified me early would have an opportunity to get to the front, because for some people, it's really a big deal, how early a backer they are. And so you have one fellow posted me, I was number 1, I was number 8. And so that way, the people who committed early on, I want to know when that goes live. That way they got to be the first through the door.
It strikes me that we've gone through the entire book content and we haven't shown people what they're buying. We've said this is what you're buying, but not how much you're getting it for. Obviously, you can donate $1. Go ahead, donate $1. I'm not going to stop you. You can get this in digital format, and it's what are you hitting 1,000 pages with this, Michael?
More like 1,500.
1,500 pages. So yeah, $75 for a digital only version on this one. That's going to take up some space on your hard drive, folks. But if digital is all you can get, and I know Robert Roberts has commented earlier that he can't tote that around. I know he works on the pipelines in the tundra, so he can't carry books around and keep them in any kind of good shape. So he buys the digitals. $75 will get this set for you. $125 is the retailer gold level. So what are we looking at the gold level, Michael?
I believe they get a whole standard set. And when I say a standard set, that is going to be, grab this monster back up here, the 4 hardcovers in dust wrappers and in the slipcase.
Okay. Now that's obviously the Burroughs one there, but
yeah, there's also going to be, and this one was sold out real quick.
Oh, we have more.
The leather editions.
Oh, yeah. Goodness.
Nice thing about the leather ones is the full stamping on the cover.
Yeah, so you're going to have a foil stamped version of this one as well.
Now this is genuine leather. This is not that fox leather. And so you get all 4 of them that way.
Very nice. Now, are they uniformly imprinted on the front? I mean, is it the same image on the front of all 4 of them when they're the gold stamped one?
Yeah, it's going to be the same image on all 4, right?
Okay, so what image did you decide on for the Conan ones when you get the gold stamp on that one? And that one, by the way, is where is that one at? The for the 240 you get the digital and the slipcase one. So 250 is the okay. Help me out here because I'm not understanding the difference here. 240 you get early bird. Okay. You're getting an early bird discount on the 241.
Yeah, I don't think you get leather yet.
Okay, for $10 off. So 250 is the same thing. As you're a gold backer, you're getting the digital and you're getting the slipcase.
Yeah, there's a retailer, and then there's the standard. If you don't have a resale permit, and then here you go into the retailer platinum, where you get the a regular set and you get a leather edition set.
Wow,
and that's just for you got to have a resale permit number to qualify for that.
Okay.
But you don't have to have a store though. You'll still have a chance to get it. There's where you can get the leather set and the digital set for $325. And like I say, these sold really fast. I mean, they were the first thing to go. People were selling dinged and dented. I mean, you can't find a leather around anywhere anymore.
No, you can't.
You can tell by what mine has dust collecting on it because I've had it hidden. Let's see.
For $400.
Yeah, that gets you the digital. That gets you the regular printed set, which will have slipcases and dust wrappers, and it also gets you the leather set in a slipcase too.
So you'd have 2 versions of it.
So the Burroughs one, the dust wrappers and the slipcase were bonuses that came along later. This time, they said, well, people are going to want them to match with the Burroughs set, so they're just going to make them that way right from the get-go.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah.
And then the Platinum Backer Plus, you're going to get. How is that different? I'm seeing the digital, the slipcase, and the dust jacket for 400.
It's early bird versus regular.
Okay, I get lost. So that's actually your highest tier, is to get the digital, the print standard, and the print leather versions. So,
and now you can multiple. I had one guy email me earlier, how do I get 5 sets? So
how do you get 5 sets? Is there an add-on capability at the checkout?
yeah, you can order multiples. You know, like you say, okay, well, I want 2 of the standard. I'll just order multiples of that, just 1 of the leather. You can order them. We'll get you taken care of.
Well,
I went ahead and put him straight through to the publisher, though, just to make sure the publisher knew what he was doing, so that way he'd be sure to get what he wanted.
Yeah, you're getting backers on almost every tier here. Obviously, the non-early bird ones aren't getting backers yet because you still qualify for early bird. So, 97 backers. Wow, that's just for the standard edition. People who are too cheap to put in for leather. Come on, it's not that much more.
Well, they do get the wrappers, so. And the nice thing about the let me pull that set up again. Nice thing about the edition with the wrappers is I feel like doing weightlifting. You can see the table.
See, all my books with wrappers on them, they end up getting little tears on them after a while. I'm like,
I get Brodart.
And you still got an illustration.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Now that wasn't by intent. That's actually an accident. What happened? We didn't realize it until they were, they'd set the type for the spines, and then when they showed a set of them online, I don't know if anybody sharp-eyed out there can see the typo on here. You probably caught it already, didn't you, Rusty?
Chronology. It's a chronology.
Yeah. As I pointed out, well, chronology is a listing of numbers in order, and these are books listed in order. And had a lot of fans like, "Hey, great, leave it that way." Like, no, we'll leave it on the spine. So if there's ever a reprint, that will not be on there. That'd be a way you can always identify a first edition hardcover if the wrapper gets separated from it, because any future reprints that'll be changed. But we did get it correct on the
wrapper.
Right.
Yep, I see it there.
So that's why this originally wasn't intended to have a dust wrapper. But then when that happened, like, okay, well, easy fix. We'll put a wrapper on it. And people were happy with it, even the way it was. But like, no, we're still going to fix it. And so that's why this set will have a wrapper on it too.
Now, will this set also have the print on the book itself?
I haven't talked to them about that. I would think so. I mean, because they're making identical. So.
Okay, so you two could be exactly identical to the Burrow. It's going to be a nice companion piece. Which now, of course, begs the question, Michael. Who's next in line? I'm going to put money on Lovecraft.
Actually, I had approached another property owner and said, "Hey, I'd love to do a chronology. I've got all the books. I could do a chronology on it." And they immediately threatened me with a lawsuit. Like, "We'll sue you." Like, hold on, never mind. Forget it then. Of the Disney ducks. Well, so I don't have to explain that story anymore. To know why I got there. Like, if we want one of those done, we'll do it ourselves. Okay, I'm just saying I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't mess with the ducks or the mouse. They'll.
But yeah, there's others I can do. I don't know if I'll ever do another one quite as big as the Burroughs and the Howard, though, because you talk about two writers who had such a huge wealth of the material, a huge wealth of publications and the pulps and the books and the comics. I mean, those two they're pretty unparalleled. I mean, you're not going to find another. I mean, even Lovecraft. I mean, it'd just be a smattering compared to what's out there of these two guys.
I know, because I'm thinking, of the other pulps, and I'm like, I know that the characters appeared a lot, but I can't think that their creators were all that, prolific. Like Lester Dent probably didn't do that
I've got
much.
some pulps back there with Lovecraft covers, and they're highly collectible. But I've been a collector all my life, so I mean, I've got a lot of good stuff I can work on. I've had a lot of stuff I used to have that I sold through my stores, but I've been a collector all my life, so there's a lot of things I collected. One thing I've always collected was anything that was published with a Frank Frazetta cover. I'd love to do a book on his history and publication.
Well, there you go. You've obviously got inroads with Sarah. Just have that conversation and see what it would take to make that happen. All right. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure seeing this on here. I've loved watching it, grow in pledges while we've been talking. Always love to see that happen for our guests. I would say good luck with it, but you've already had it. So, just keep raking it in.
I'm thrilled. It's been fantastic.
All right.
Thanks,
Rusty, thank you for joining us too.
Thank you for having me.
Now, where can people find what you're doing, Rusty? Because I know we've got the Wild Stars link for Michael, and we've shown the website that's down below. But what do you do other than this?
I spend too much time on Facebook, so you can find me there.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of there myself. I'm more of a Twitter addict.
No, I decided I was going to just stick to one. If I got onto another social medium, I would never get anything done.
I've done the same
I can get
thing.
into more fights on Twitter.
On Twitter.
Yeah. If you're not on Twitter, never start.
Us a chance to talk about this.
Well, I knew it's been coming for a long time, and today being the launch date, appreciate being the first stream you guys have gone on. Have you got more? You got more streams planned to get out and promote this? I mean, there should be other channels out there that would like to talk about this. I would think at least Billy Tucci's Pop XP is one that would be interested.
Yeah, I haven't talked to anybody yet, but I'd be happy to. I'll probably be plugging on this podcast called The Local Comic Shop Guys probably this Saturday. But that's
who stole my title?
Local Comic Shop Guys. You might have heard of it.
I like the title, but I'm thinking maybe I should have filed some trademarks. Let me talk with those Disney Duck people and see how you proceed on something like this. All right, everybody in the chat, thank you so much for showing up tonight. I always say we don't have a show without you, so we appreciate you being here. I will not say hit the like button, because if you don't like it, I don't want to make you. But I will ask you to hit the share button to spread this video around, get the book in front of more eyeballs. Your social circles are different than our social circles, so that's the ripple effect that gets this thing put out there in front of more fans who will be interested in this. If you're watching this on the replay, the link to this Kickstarter is right below the video, as is the link to Michael's website for thewildstars.com. You can find out the other books he's been working on and writing. And a little bit further down from there, you'll find some of the books that Critical Blast publishes, including The Devil You Know, an anthology of horror stories and comedy stories and science fiction stories, all about people's encounters with Old Scratch. If that's your kind of thing, then by all means check that out as well. And as always, we just hope you had a